不能只在我想，那些都
And thank you everyone for being here this morning. As all of you have seen from the announcements and the agendas, this is our last session focused on the tribal membership. And so I'm very thankful that you all made the time to come here, because this is really important that we get the input and your feedback today. And so you're all provided an agenda. And I'll just walk through that quickly before we get to introducing the team here and the presentation and our purpose. So we're going to start this morning. How many of you attended the Who Belongs conference in November? Okay, good. Again, we have a really good response of folks that were able to attend. What we're going to start the presentation with this morning is just a quick review of that presentation to just kind of get everybody back on track, but also for those that were not able to attend it, to get a little bit of backdrop as to what this work is about and what's driving this work. So we'll do that in the agenda that's called the Lift and the Blindfold piece, and then we'll open it up for a little bit of discussion with the group to see if there's any feedback you might have. Take a quick break, and then we'll go on to the second piece, which is the most important part for us. We need to inform or get your feedback on why it is we're suggesting a particular model. And I'll be very clear, we're not saying that this is the model, but we're just suggesting a model based on the research and information that we've received so far. So we'll do that presentation and give you the backdrop to that, have some discussion, and then we'll break for lunch. And so the provost providing lunch for everyone today. So last week they had all the food set up in there, and we just brought our food back in here so we could really wanted to continue talking. So we'll probably do something similar again today. Once we get through that that second piece of the session, then we're going to put you to a little bit of work with a breakout sessions. We want to go through a process of facilitation with you to help us get your voice captured so that we can provide it back to the council. And when we get closer to that, I'll walk you through that process. So as a part of that exercise, it's going to take a little bit of brain thought, but I think it's going to be very valuable for us in capturing your words. So as we go through the day today, and just set in the tone today we're not here to talk about policy or procedure. We're not down in the weeds yet. We're still kind of up here trying to figure out what is going to be that best approach to go forward. That will be really council's work to determine how policy, procedure, process gets addressed once we get this information back. So So the basic issue that we're trying to address is whether or not we continue with the process of using blood quantum as a qualifier to be a member of the club. And on the second part of the presentation, we'll show you one of the models that we've that's been shared with us and how they're doing it. And so there's a number of models out there, but we'll share with you at least one of them so that you kind of get an idea of who else and what else is being done. So with that being said, so I want to go ahead and introduce the team here before we get further on. So as part of our commission membership, we have Mr. Ed Tremaya, Ms. Elsie Bayo, myself, Mr. Alvin Martin, who's a tribal interpreter. The reason we have Alvin with us is at the Hutu Conference, two things came out really important. The first one was involvement of our young people, making sure that our younger folks are involved in the social young currents because they're going to be the ones that have to deal with this one in the future. The second piece is the importance of, we see some of the elders in the room, the importance of using language, our language to be able to articulate what's being presented. But also, as a group, and LCD and the teacher, both her and Ed in the school system, we thought this could also be an opportunity for those of us that are still learning, maybe if there's one word we walk away with today, maybe those are things that we could share throughout the day when we go through the process here. So Alvin's our helper in this area. And then Robert Antonio is also one of our members. We did have 3 youth as part of the commission, but for whatever reason, Governor pulled them off, so we don't have any youth with us right now. So hopefully we'll be able to get some youth back on the team here, and so that we can be able to move it forward with that young group. So with that, you saw this first part of the presentation, those of you that were down at Rio Puerto. For those of you that were not there, this first piece is really important just to give you a background as to what the council has asked this group to do. And this is not a new topic or a new initiative, nor is this something that those of us sitting up here at the table just decided to do as a project. This is a council directive. And so our committee in phase 1, here's what we were assigned to do, and it's really to assist council by researching and providing the history of tribal membership and its impact through blood quantum. Identifying research that has been done in prior years, not only on our membership, but what other tribes have done. George Pratt is sitting here today with us as well. He did a lot of work on some of this, so we've actually referenced some of his work as well that you did a few years back. So we have another brain to pick in the room, and there's other thoughts that you might have for Mr. Pratt. And then seeking input on the lineage model. What we're not assigned to do, we're not here to determine policy or debate policy or anything like that. We're not here to determine the new model, nor were we assigned to determine who's going to be a member. This really came out of, if you recall, in 2012, we had a constitutional amendment, and part of that constitutional amendment included the removal of 2-year restriction. If you recall, in 1984, in that constitutional amendment, the council at the time put in a 2-year restriction that said if when a child is born, the parents, guardians, or whomever have 2 years to enroll that child. If they miss that 2 years, the best that person could be is naturalized, even if they meet the blood quantum requirement. They can't be a regular member. So, leapfrogging ahead to 2012, when we removed the 2-year restriction, some of the conversation was that the amendment in 1984 made sense for the idea of trying to get folks enrolled. But the challenge was that what about those children that were adopted out, that didn't have a choice? So those kind of things that allow those children to become members. It also allows for a path back, meaning some of you, probably the older folks in the room, recall some of the traditional practices that if an individual married out into another tribe, that individual sometimes went to that tribe relinquished their membership with us and went to that tribe. Life could happen, the person, maybe their spouse passes on or divorce or whatever, the person wants to come home, there's no path back because of that 1984 rule. So what 2012 did is it eliminated that and created a path back. So those kind of things happen. So as a result of that 2012 amendment, one of the things that came back was from the community, and it's good to see Perry and Antonio back here, Charles, others that were serving in the council at the time. Some of the conversations at the time that came back from the villages was that, okay, now that you've made that change, we can move that to your restriction. Now we want you to think about an alternative way to become members, an alternative to look at. So that's where this work started. So it's not just something that started this year or this folks decided to do. So it's been something that's been aside from the council for a number of years. And so before I get into the presentation here, I'm going to ask the board members if they have, or commission members, if they have any comments. Sitting up here with us is Tony Toribio. She is one of the youth members as well. So anybody want to make any opening comments before we go any further?
My Matai, I can speak so open when see dark traffic. I told him why my net is the side option to find the Kuduna. I do not do it if they wish it. The face did not, or human wish it. Face we do not. The face we don't go back to Yama, think that it was too big. That's the idea of their two section. Okay, do not run, and again, thank you this morning for all my relatives here that we're all related one way or another. To say thank you for all of you for being here this morning. This work, like Dr. RJ has already said, has been in progress for quite some time. But we've been working at this very diligently for almost about a task, and about a year and a half of doing them too right now, to see ways that we can, offer you things to think about. And again, like we said, it's not about us making the change. We're not here to change your mind, but you've got something to think about. To feed off of, to plant a seed of thought in your hearts, in your soul, in your minds. That way, maybe you can continue to make those right decisions. That way, council can have make the right decisions for you as we move forward. This is your voice. This is your time to say, what's important to you as well. So, we just want to thank you for being here. God will guide us in the way to creation. I haven't done.
I'm pleased to see so many of you here today. I hope that we can provide you the information so that you can provide feedback for us, which is very crucial for all of us. And I think I just want to remind all of you that this is for the future of our children. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, they're the ones that we need to think of. So as you're listening to the presentation and this afternoon when we're going through our process of getting information from you, I'd like for you to keep those children in mind, because they're the ones that are going to be affected. And I say this from the bottom of my heart because all of us in here are affected by it, or will be affected by it somewhere in the future. So I'm really pleased that you have decided to come and spend the day with us. Amen.
Då är så här ett jämnt paket så jag hoppas att jag ska kanske vara en annan man för att se tunna no I it's a equation. It's a man see you ministry say but what she it's a going comment after she do not try fruits. I'm going to speak to you in our language. Okay, I hope you guys understand, and I just want to say that in our language just to kind of see if this might help you out, how we can get our people as Laguna members to new strategy in the use to stay to open see to inspire player book. See how you show me as a strategy here. Last year, see can you show to it's a one way of later, when she said you here, she not you do this. It's a chef come a no strategy here. She go to one down over the go. See you down, see one of the inspired. She has to go with gates that go from over. You do not, British do not use it as a chitun is out to say strategy have the over. You can make a great food on your great awareness. See, Kaya Sumesh, see, it's a new strategy. You're not asking to pay where go. Moya, Mahana, Sati, Chatham is the situation group, it put us. It's a scar trader. It's Kaya Sumesh. That's a it's about which the Evan Charles Punch, it's a strong Sinai Giant Tom, as you might get the hammer strong at them about which the don't use this here, to crazy, she gave some free door to it here to such show up and was a sign she was a last year you done up to Sunny Show Trader is a new strategy. That's a drama she drew such and it's a try in a type. We're going to do not about who go comments on. Do not say in a zan, hold the shots on, Scratzy, do not okay. It's a refuse you time. That's a yes man from a such. Do not wash condition. No, you Scratzy, and may by 2 times. We may still put on this to pay tight. And go back where the highest man, no, you each concept and the 9 minutes to speak to not as I had some shade, yeah, cheat to some more in one another to speak in human say queer, it's a ammonia one another to such a one as 9 minutes to new strategy. Our goodness, I trade do not let you go back there and do not know it's good. They say go about our prepared. How I might not cook sana starting shit. We have not cooked to animal now. Yes, it guys. Yeah, it's very young. You have not cooked 100 years. But to see away here, then you have to go out and go out. You have not like Kuala, keep breaking the greenish. I call them when we have not cooked. It's a head. She'll see, no, you 100. I do away to 80 what we do use and do side but no part do it yet that I kind do a guess sign I like those why is it was do a magic share session I could connection kind of stage go do a safety here one I just want to change my back to English. We're at a crucial point now. You know, this blood column has, I guess I should ask, how has it affected you and how has it affected your family? That's one question. The question is that if you had a chance, that one chance to change it, what would it be? And this is what we want to hear. This is what we want you, the people's voice, so we can take this back to the council. So it could go from there. I know it's a scary thing that, you know, one of these days, if we don't do any kind of change or anything, that we could lose this. We could lose our identity.
as for right now, I believe there was 260 full-blooded, as you consider full-blooded Lagunas. And in 30 years, that's going to be down to 130. Because at this age, they're not childbearing people. Another 30 years, it'll be down to 0. So that's the really scary thing about it, to be honest with you. Do we continue to be Lagunas as a people? Or do we take that risk of losing everything if something isn't done? Okay, it's a it's a yeah, man school from the get a train, okay, it's all the whole thing to ask the stroke, or me hammer. To him, it's a hammer to do. It's a new update to our mission. What's the high sick to us to a huge stuff to ship. I mean, they have no you get shot there, man go to shops. It's me on a dwemer has the mental men, yeah, cruise. At home do, as the whole doom of Australia. As the men are doing, women are trying to do it. Okay,
Thank you, everyone, for your input. So, again, this first piece of the presentation is really just the backdrop, especially for those that were not able to attend in November. So we'll provide this backdrop to you. And before we jump into it, we did invite the council members, so I'm sure we'll get asked the question, where's council? So being proactive, we did invite them and let them know to be participatory because they need to hear what you're saying. We're just capturing, you know. And so I don't know whether the room from we're council members, but we're also the commission. But I was hoping that other council members would be here to participate. Last weekend we did have Marty Kouimi and Sean Ray did show up as well, and the travel secretary did attend last weekend as well. So, but I was hoping that we'll have more here today just because it's a community-wide conversation. The other piece of this is, as we did last weekend and as we did in November, you see Todd Min sitting in the back here helping us out. This is also on YouTube, so make sure your hair is combed and everything. So, but it's on YouTube again. A lot of really great feedback from the community members, especially those that are not home, to be able to participate via YouTube and be aware of what the discussion is that's going on. So that's happening. And if anybody's asking you how to access it, it's the same YouTube channel that we used the last go around. So you can just look for it's under my name. Just look for it on YouTube. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this next piece and really get into the backdrop as to why we're here. So I'm going to just pull everything over. So if you remember, those of you that were at the November conference, but for those of you that are new today, what this graph is showing what the impact has been number-wise. And I saw on the sign-in sheet, Lorraine Silva, she helped us out significantly on this first piece of the presentation by providing a lot of this data from the enrollment office. So if you recall, the Pueblo, it wasn't until 1949 that we put membership on our Constitution. And at that time, you only had to be 1/2 Indian. You didn't have to be Laguna. You just had to be 1/2 Indian. So in order to be a member. Then in 1958, that changed in our second constitutional amendment. In that second constitutional amendment, it changed from 1/2 Indian to being 1/2 Laguna. So in 1958, that switch happened. And so what we did with these numbers is that we said, let's imagine if no change took place from 1958 up to today, what would our numbers look like? So in 1958, when that amendment took place, well, what's going on with my phone? But in 1958, that number, that 3,240 that you see there, that's how many tribal members we had in 1958. Leapfrog 50 years, or 58 years, 2012. If we'd done nothing during that time period, we would have 2,522 members. Leapfrog 30 years out, we're going to be sitting at about 478 members. So you look at then the red line, started at the same time period, 1984 change, we saw that spike. We did nothing from then all the way to 30 years out, we'll be sitting at about 800 members. Same thing on the green line. And the idea behind this is to give you just an idea. This isn't any scientific analysis, but just based on some of the numbers that Lorraine helped us with. It gives you a pretty good idea of what happens or what is happening with membership. And this isn't unique to Laguna. And as we go out in the years and blood quantum becomes lower and lower, you have fewer and fewer people eligible for membership. That's why you see what we do. When we make a change, all we do is Band-Aid. You see the spike, that's the Band-Aid when it comes back down every time. So this has been the driver as to why council made this a critical initiative for the commission to drive forward, to address how do we go forward. But more importantly, following through on what the people said in 1980 or in 2012, that said, what is going to be the alternative to blood quantum? So that's where these numbers come from. This is a quick snapshot of the history that's contributed to our blood quantum dilemma. So in 1908, we accepted our first constitution. There was no membership requirements or enrollment or anything like that that was applicable to the Pueblo. As a result of the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act that introduced the one-half or more Indian or any Indian blood model, our Constitution was amended to accept that. There was no provisions for being born out of wedlock during that Constitution. 1958, we saw our second constitutional change. And this constitutional change went from one-half Indian to being one-half Laguna. Born out of wedlock was imposed, but it only applied to the father. So when you look at that document, it doesn't include both parents, it only applies to the father. So as we put that policy and some of the research behind it, we couldn't find any reason as to why that was the case. I mentioned Lorraine, she helped us a lot on the data piece, but also former Tribal Secretary Frank Cerno helped us a lot with the research on this and finding policies and ordinances and documentation to this as well. So we're not just pulling things out of the air in this information. So one of the other pieces that is really important in this 1958 constitutional amendment, some of you may have had the opportunity to look at older council minutes and even had the opportunity to talk to some of the men that were serving in our council during those time periods. Some of them are still with us. But what's interesting in those conversations as well as in those documents is what was happening at the time. And those of you that were, maybe some of the older folks recall, the mines were in operation, right? So it's during this time period we began to see our first wave of royalties coming from the mines. And Tisha, Victor Cecino, he used to tell a funny story about how when they first got the Pueblo got their first royalty check. It's one of these big checks, and they used this for kind of advertising, marketing, $5 million. They took it around to every village, showing it to folks, and they deposit the money and all those kind of things right away. And so It's more funny when he tells it, but it was an interesting time. But I shared that because that also became the driver for why this blood quantum change was made from 1/2 Indian to 1/2 Laguna. It was money. So when you look at the older council minutes, it's really interesting to see the dialogue that was happening even within our council during that time period. So moving on to 1984, we saw that amendment take place, and this is where, at this time period, the council reduced the blood quantum from 1/2 down to 1/4. And one of the reasons was because nobody, or I should say nobody, but there was a significant decrease in the number of people that were being eligible at 1/2. It was beginning to flatten. So in order to get more membership, we had to now reduce the blood quantum. So that's what happened in 1984. They also put in a 1-year restriction, or 2-year restriction, I'm sorry, on this. And again, it was the driver, when you look at the minutes and talk to some of the individuals that were serving in that time, the driver was to get, maybe enforce people to be responsible to get their children, grandchildren enrolled. But again, it was also to try to spike that membership. We also saw in this time period the introduction of the paternity decree. So it wasn't in any prior constitution or reform that was introduced during this time period. There's a significant piece that's happened during the 1984 constitutional amendment as well, and it also happened in 1958. And what had happened is when this change took place, the enrollment committee took the initiative to also look at tribal members enrolled, their blood quantum, and reduce the blood quantum of certain families, tribal members. That created a huge mess in our public. As a matter of fact, our council just last year restored the blood quantum for one of the individuals and their families. And there's going to be others, or there were others that was restored as well because of that 1984 time period. Again, that was the same issue in 1958. So, as was mentioned, it's very difficult to be able to determine 4/4 Lagunas because of those types of instances. But when you look further back in history, the non-requirement for membership and not being Laguna, but just being Indian. So it makes it an interesting conversation. But it's also very important to make sure that this conversation isn't to debate who's 4/4 or not. That's not the conversation. It's really the focus on how is it that we maintain membership and grow our public. So then you look at the 2012 amendment to the Constitution, and in this amendment we removed the 2-year restriction, and from the community, from the villages, the request came to look at alternative methods for membership other than blood quantum. So as you can see, it's not something that just started this past year or a couple of years ago. It's something that's been going on for a number of years. And so, even all the way back to these prior constitutions when the blood quantums have changed. And so, one of the things that's going to come out here that the council will have to address in going through this, and this is why your voice is so very important. When you look at our Constitution, there will be constitutional amendments if we go down this process. Is that in 1984, they changed the blood quantum level, right, from 1/2 down to 1/4. When you look at the Constitution, that requires a 75% voter turnout on reservation members. Those living in Albuquerque or Ranch or whatever don't vote in that election. What we're saying is that we're not asking you if you want to change the blood quantum levels. What we're asking is, do you even want to use blood quantum?
very different question. Right? So if it's the latter, do you want to use blood quantum? Yes or no? That only requires a 30% of everybody. Our goal is to include everybody, not to exclude anyone. But that's not our choice. That's why your voice is important. That's what ultimately informs the council. The other challenge that we run into is that we sat with our attorneys the other day, I guess maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it was an interesting discussion because if we were going to change the blood quantum that we did in 1984, our Constitution is very contradictory because you need the 75%, but you also need the 30%. It's a very difficult thing to achieve. So we've made it difficult even in our own Constitution. And so one of the consultants we have working with us, Professor Hershey, Robert Hershey from the University of Arizona Law School, he shared with us over 200 different constitutions and how they've addressed this issue. It's really interesting, how other tribes have done it. Some have done some pretty cool stuff. Others have made it worse. So we have a lot of reference to look at that. But I shared that we're not here to make a decision on that issue, but I plant that seed with you so that you have the time to think about it when you have an opportunity. If you don't have one already, pick up one of our tribal constitutions and take a look at it. Look at those contradictions. Article 2, Section F, and then Article 15 are the two sections that talk to those issues and the contradictions. Article 2 is membership, and Article 15 is the amendment section. So, moving on to our next slide here. So one of the things that we'll talk about in the next phase of the presentation is in this article, actually Article 2, but Section 3. We have a process of enrollment. We have an office of enrollment. We have to meet blood quantum, fraternity, born out of wedlock, all these different requirements that we have. But at the end of the day, when you look at Section 3, powers of the Pueblo Council over membership, the Pueblo Council shall have the sole authority to determine eligibility for enrollment as a member of the Pueblo. No decree of any court purporting to determine membership in the Pueblo, fraternity, or degree of Laguna Indian or other blood shall be recognized as determinative of membership of the Pueblo. Meaning, you can go through the whole process of filling out the forms, going through enrollment, but at the end of the day, council can allow anybody to be a member. Or disallow anybody to be a member. So that authority resides within the council body, not within the enrollment office or the enrollment committee. It resides with the council. So that's something that exists. This is right out of our current Constitution. Another thing that's really important for us to be thinking about as we go through this process is we've heard time and time again in our whether it's village meetings or community conversations, family conversations, naturalized members. Do naturalized members have rights? And everybody says no, they don't. However, when you look at this ordinance that was passed in 1959, March 14, 1959, I apologize, you can't see the dates, but this is the second one. March 14, 1959, this ordinance gives rights to our tribal members, our naturalized members. They have to serve a 5-year period, but that last paragraph, a conditional member may acquire full rights to Pueblo financial benefits and land assignments after such person has gone through a probationary period of 5 years from the date of receiving conditional membership may acquire full rights. What's concerning about this when we've discussed this in council is, has council been in violation of its own law? This is a huge, there's no record that this has ever been rescinded. So, naturalized members have rights. Yet, many years later, we have policy that says, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Barbara and I was here with us last week, and she shared with us one of the areas that, well, naturalized members, you can get wood. Wow. Right? And when you think about individuals that have grown up here their whole life, this is all they know. So these are some of the things that we need to be thinking about and reflecting on, and how do we get this back into place? How do we realign our laws that are currently in the books? The other piece of this is domestic issues. Council would have the authority right now in the state of New Mexico, and I was going to pull it in this presentation, that reminded me of it. San Ildefonso Pueblo has an interesting model that they use for marriage and recognizing the traditional marriages. The state of New Mexico recognizes that traditional marriage from the respective Pueblo. We have the ability to do the same thing. In 1958, our traditional marriages were de-recognized, I don't know if that's a word, by our council. So we're beginning to, already back then, devalue our own systems, our own ways of thinking, and adopt someone else's. So why this is important is, again, in the next phase of the presentation, we're going to need to be thinking about adoptions. We're going to need to be thinking about marriage, because we have many tribal members that their spouse is from another tribe or from another area. Ed and I were just talking this morning. His wife had the opportunity to attend last weekend. His wife has spent the majority of her adult life here in the region. She lived in Haines for 18 years, and the balance of her life has been here. You look at individuals like my grandfather, who was from Zuni, but the majority of his adult life was here. Governor Herrera, his father, was from Coaching, but his majority of his adult life was here. I mean, growing up as a kid here, I think for many years I never even knew that he wasn't from here. But those aren't unique cases. I think almost every family probably has situations like that. So how do we allow them to be known? So that's why this is going to be important going into the future, because at some point, and I'll be very clear, today's not talking about benefits or things like that. But at some point, that conversation is going to come out in this process. Because we look at things like right now, our Merumos ordinance allows what the Merumos can give land assignments in the villages for only 2 reasons: for residential and for agriculture. And so, and in those situations, we also see when life happens, maybe a spouse passes on, and the spouse that passes on is the tribal member. The surviving non-tribal member, what do you do? Some villages say, well, they can't have any of the property, they can't have anything. But using our village at Prahi as an example, we've had instances where the surviving spouse was not a tribal member, not even native. But the village said, you've been here at ditch work, at public work, at village, you're more of a tribal member than some of our tribal members. the individual was not given the land assignment, but the individual was given the property to improve the home, to live out his life. He's since moved away back to Utah. But we have instances like that. So different applications of our ordinance and how we allow benefits in the community. So that's why this piece is going to be important going into the future. Because if we stay with the way our model is now, again, we have young people, even adults, that this is all you know, this is all we know. But maybe you're naturalized or you just missed the blood quantum amount. What does mom or dad or grandpa do with the home or the land assignment? You can't have it. So those are things that we need to work through to figure out how we correct those pieces. So in summary of this, in summary of this first piece of the backdrop, do we continue with blood quantum? If we do, we kind of already know what the outcome's going to be. We're suggesting, and in the next presentation we'll talk more about it in a little bit more specificity, a lineage or belonging model. And what does that look like? And why? But also to have the opportunity for you to have the feedback to say, that model is not going to work, here's why, or here's a suggestion. So if you have other ideas, other suggestions, we're going to be wide open to that. It's not going to hurt our feelings. Our goal is to give the feedback. It's not to dictate to here's what we want to do. We're wide open because ultimately we'll feed this back to the council and they'll make the decision how that goes. So that's for those of you that attended the Who Belongs conference in November. I hope this piece served as just kind of a refresher. But for those of you that did not have the opportunity to attend, I hope that this served as a platform to give you some context as to why this issue is so serious, but also inform you for the next piece of the presentation, which will be presented, the belonging or the lineage model that we want your feedback on. So it kind of gives, hopefully we've got everybody to the same sheet of music with this piece. So with that being said, I'm going to open up the floor here for maybe some questions, comments that you might have on this first piece of the presentation, and then we'll take a quick break and then come back in and start that second piece of the dialogue. So before I open it up, did I miss anything, guys? I hope you're going to make any comments. Okay. So that being said, any thoughts, comments on Hillary? Silva just walked in. For those of you that may not know Lorraine here, this first piece of the presentation, as I mentioned, she was instrumental in helping us out with logging the data on those pieces. So when we get, like I mentioned, when we get to the second phase of the presentation, it's really building on this first phase. So I want to acknowledge her because she was a lot of help in this first piece of it. That being said, questions? Yes, sir.
This is just to organize my thinking about how, I'm trying to organize my thinking about how a change in the article, the membership article might look in light of what you just presented, Richard, so that we would have, or it would be could be constructed in a way that the principal statement about citizenship or whatever term we use leads off, and then these other situations, as those that we described, would be in more of the form of an ordinance underneath that, or how would that look? And how would that look? Because we have all the villages with ordinances.
So her question basically was that, correct me if I restate it wrong. Her question basically is that with the changes that will be made, both with the underlying components look like ordinances, constitutional changes as we move forward, correct? Okay. So that being said, the ordinances, what those will look like, at this point, it's above our pay grade. But I think to her point, her question though is very important because, and this is why your feedback is important, is because your feedback will help to inform those ordinances. It will help to inform the policies that what this will eventually look like. Because there will be constitutional changes if we go down that path, right? So the council will need that information to help them figure out how do we best frame the question. So as we finish this, and we'll show you at the end of the next presentation some of the next steps. And one of the next steps is meeting with the council on this feedback, but also beginning to frame what those constitutional amendments might be. There'll be another round coming back out, or probably a couple rounds coming back out to the community on those potential constitutional changes to get your feedback. So the council hasn't decided if we're going to be the group to be that committee or the commission to work those constitutional changes, or if they're going to establish a new committee. Hopefully they'll make that decision soon, because this work has to continue moving forward. So that it will come back to help those more informed specific questions as it relates to ordinances and so on and so forth. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yes, I also say I hope the council decides to keep you guys on the workforce, because it's difficult when another group has to pick up what the previous group brought forth.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So,
Now, just before we start, so we don't know some of you all. I apologize. Could you say your name so we can get it captured?
yeah, sure. My name is Nadine Groening, spelled Groenig, and I'm half Laguna. My mother was Tilly Aragon, but she married my father, became Tilly Prather, so I'm from the Aragons and the Ponchos, and I'm from the village of Ensenada. And I have some thoughts about lineage versus blood quantum and all of that, but I think I'll save that until after your second presentation. So my question now has to, well, first of all, you said the amendment for membership, that the tribal council has the authority to allow people in as members or to disallow them as members. I wanted to know, in all the other constitutions that you went through, is that the same for other tribes that you saw? That's question one. Question two is, with all the changes, or recommended changes, amendments to the Constitution, can that all be disallowed or thrown out if the council chooses to retain that it's a right, I guess, to allow members in or not? Do you foresee that maybe one of the changes to the Constitution would be that there would be more to it in terms of who's allowed as a member and who's not?
Okay, thank you for your question or questions. So just to make sure I understand the second question. The second question is that if changes are recommended or suggested, does council have the authority to throw them out or allow them or accept them? Yes. Okay. So in the first question, in other constitutions that we've seen, and she's referencing the 200 plus that Professor Hershey shared with us from the University of Arizona and what other tribes are doing. And in a lot of those constitutions, yes. And this is a reflection of the adoption of the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act and those template constitutions. When you look at those constitutions, I mean, you could just change the name of the tribe and it's going to be the same constitution. One example, you look at San Pedro Pueblo and Luna Pueblo's constitution, that's practically the same. Reads almost word for word, with the exception of the name of the Pueblo. So, and there's others that have modified their constitutions pretty significantly. that doesn't have this kind of conflict. The second question is that the suggestions, recommendations that might be provided, would council retain the authority to keep that component, that section of their power to allow or disallow. I think if that comes back strong enough as an issue or an item, they would have to consider it. Right? They would have to think about how does that happen. And when we come back out to the community with those constitutional changes, that's the time to pose those types of questions, right? Because I think that becomes a critical. Does that ultimately reside with the council? Or does that, do you think about a different model to be able to say it's X% of voter turnout that is required to make this change, or significant changes? Because what you also want to be able to do is you don't want to create a constitution that's so loosey-goosey that, a rogue council can come in and just wipe out stuff or just change things. You want it to be able to be a responsible constitution that it's going to take things like this to make significant changes. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions, thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
Aye.
Hino me yeyoeza eshawi kanusta, oiko nesta, and kuishji nesta. I'd like to welcome everyone here today. I wish we had more of a turnout than what we have right now. I came all the way from Dulce, and I have 3 sons that are enrolled here. They've been raised on the Hickory Apache Reservation because that's where their dad is from. He's half Zuni and half Hickory. But I would like to continue to encourage the members that we have right here. They've given us a lot of information that we need to continue. And we need for them to say, why recreate the wheel when the wheel is already made? It's right here. Why invest in somebody from some other tribe to come and tell us what we need to do? We know what we need to do. So that's what I would like for the council to know and understand. And I wish we had more of the council members that were here today to hear. Yes, some of them were here last Saturday. Why can't they have come here today? But I guess there's other priorities they may have besides those of us that are here today to speak and tell what they need to hear from us. That's who I am.
Thoughts, comments? Lorraine, I showed that graph with the numbers. They're on the spot. No? It's not a test. Well, it's pretty straightforward information. So what we'll do is let's take a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and start into the next conversation. But that doesn't mean you can't ask more questions if something comes to mind. Let's get into the next phase of the presentation, and after the break, when we come back. So let's take a quick 10-minute. There's some coffee if you haven't already found it, some rolls and snacks back there. So let's reconvene here at 10:20.
in the feast parade. I can carry our bag. Amazed our gallant.
26. Volleyball.
Oh, volleyball. The other one, grants are gallant. Where are you going?
No, Joe, I'm joking. He's my uncle. Yeah. One time she was Vicky Paquin. His wife was Vicky Paquin. Yeah, Zuni. Yeah. My dad, Ivan, from Zuni. No, my dad was Joe Paquin.
I'm so surprised to see you guys. Did you? You didn't go up to the Garces? Shelley and them, where they have their trailer? I haven't thought that what's her name? I said, you're Yeah, because see, when my niece got hospitalized was when they were going to put drum in New York, and she was afraid, as I said, if they had to be hospitalized or something like that, they have IHS to go back.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons for naturalizing the kids. And I thought this because they've been naturalized.
Well, this one here, this
Well, the oldest one is not. And they've all been naturalized. And so, you know. Yeah, because it's like my niece her kids when I met. So with that, she got naturalized. So now that law naturalization affects us because if that law is that law is the books and hasn't been rescinded. They've been out for years. Yeah, and so that's where these meetings are it's a benefit because my sister her kids, my sister's grandkids, out of state, and I did tell them that. I told them, I said, you can get us the meetings. And I did tell them that this meeting was going to be That's the reason why she did what she did. And she did. She got it naturalized. They were naturalized. It's a plus for her. She was swamping and not enough That's the way. Yeah, same here.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, and that's one of the things, right? We're just now making the years. Yeah. So I was just right. Well, that they just think about the China feel like Marcy, and then I can get up from my phone and it's also oh yeah. And we're still the cops. Oh, or you know, in Gallup, Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get reconvened here and get going on the second piece of the presentation. So as we're getting reconvened here, I just want to point out these articles that we left out in the front. That's part of your packet. This is just more FYI for you, so that you're able to do a little bit of reading. And I would encourage you, if you get the chance, to do some of your own research as well. It'll be very helpful not only to us but to the larger community, because we can't get to everybody. So I would encourage that. We also have if there's information that you see up here, maybe historical or some of the legal stuff, history, and those of you that might have information on it and maybe we're incorrect, please help us with that as well. We have I mentioned Professor Hershey at the University of Arizona at the law school. Some of the students help us with some of this research. So that's greatly useful to us. So if you have anything that's out there, and just spark off a conversation to have with Mouse or Cino, he does a lot of research. So Those of you that are into that, your help and input would be greatly appreciated. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next piece of the presentation. And to set this piece of the presentation, the first phase was really about the backdrop as to why we're doing this, what's the driver. This next phase is our suggestion to you based on what we've heard back from all of you, from the Hubulans and from the previous conversations with other groups that we've held this session with. And so we want to be able to get your feedback on how we go forward. And we're going to use this piece of the presentation for a couple of things. Again, to give you our suggestion, but to share a little bit of maybe historical context. And the graphics on your right, I'll touch on shortly. But you also see why this is important for us is you look at 25 CFR, you look at HUD, you look at ICWA, you look at all these federal documents. They have a definition for a deed, but it's not our definition. So what we're hoping is that you all will come up with how we define ourselves. That's very important. So as I mentioned, the use of the language, so Alvin helped us come up with the title of this next phase of the presentation. But also in this next phase, the pictures that you see on the right, one of the things you'll see is we already have systems and institutions that demonstrate how we belong. These are the Oud English. These are at the Brooklyn Museum in New York. There's about 52 of these out there. And these were collected during the late 1800s. And so why we thought it would be valuable to show this to you is that, especially for our mothers and the females, this was a long connection. We don't use these anymore, but it demonstrates our connection. So what we hope this also does is inform, we're talking about lineage, but how do we define lineage in our own terms? Why do we belong? So as we go through this presentation, what we hope to do is to give a framework, or at least suggest, and you help us fill out that framework of what it means to belong. How do we define our connection? Okay. So that being said, in this phase 2, similar to the previous phase, in this next phase, we're seeking input from you on the belonging model. As we said, the previous presentation was just here it is, here's the backdrop. This one, we're actually going to ask you for some feedback. If you have other models, ideas, by all means, please share them with us. Provide community feedback and data to the council that will be used to inform the next steps. So what you give us, like I said, it's not our ability to decide what's going to be the end result. Our responsibility is to structure that, to present that to council, to make a decision as to how to move forward. Because ultimately, this is leading up to, in November of this year, our work plan is that we hope we'll have had enough conversations, sessions like this in the community, and we're going to have more, especially when it focuses on the Constitution, so that come November, the council has enough information to make a go, no-go decision as to whether or not we move towards a referendum. So that's what this work is used. So if the council makes a decision in November to say, yes, we're going to, if there's enough feedback, we want to make a change, then that work on the referendum process starts. Council can't change the Constitution. The only authority they have is to call for a referendum. So that's why this is so important. And it goes to Evelyn's question as to what's going to be the question. There may be a number of questions. But that's why this work is so important as to what's going to go in that referendum. Similar to the first phase, we're not here to decide the outcome. We're not here to ultimately decide what model will be used. And again, we're not here to determine membership. So that's the framework for this piece of the work. What we'll do in this presentation is we'll share the findings from the Who Belongs conference. Again, those of you that attended, we gave you surveys to fill out, and we got a bunch of them back. So I'm really appreciative to all of you that took the time to not only fill them out, but some of those comments were people took time to think about their responses. So we greatly appreciate that, and we'll share some of those responses with you. We'll present the lineage model and why we think it's the best model for us. And then we'll look for your feedback on what we presented to you. And so, again, today we're not here to solve the world's problems on this issue, but we hope that we can gain enough information and feedback from you that will allow us to take back a solid response from all of you. At the end of this, like I said, we're going to have a breakout session, so we're going to ask you to actually do a little bit of work this afternoon, and those of you that were here this past week, and Pauline and Irvin, a few others kind of went through the Latino sisters went through that process with us, so they can probably be tutors and help us. But we'll go through that process later, and I'll explain the steps. So to kind of set the stage and make the connection here, lineage is a term that's used on the outside, right? You know, and maybe for legal documents or what the outside world understands. But when we talk about our own framework, this is a demonstration of that. You see the picture on your right. This is a picture of Laguna in the late 1800s. You see a Rajkama way back there, hence the dot line. And you see them using the Uti. So here's a connection. Here's how we demonstrate how we belong. It's really important that we try to reconnect with these systems that already exist. Somewhere along the way, though, we've fractured those connections for whatever reason. It could be our own self-doing, it could be external government, it could be other people. There's probably enough blame to go around. But what opportunity do we have to find those reconnection points?
Mà hay là sao vậy thì cái năng suất về cái cần yêu hâm mộng, mỹ hâm mộng, tôi có một cái hồ sơ chụp mỹ chụp hệ và ưu tiên chui sản xuất cái yêu hâm mộng thì coi cái chủ áo mà là chủ áo mỹ hâm mộng hay gì đó. I'm going to kind of mix this up. The old folks used to use that, but right now we don't use it anymore. We lost a lot. It's unsecure. We can't bring it back. We don't know how those were made or who makes them. I know what they used to make that, or is it cardboard? I don't know. But how much you mean? I share steel on heads answer to our house new notes on the home you. Go back. I will see puzzle. Chỉ hệ quá xí anh này thì cái damage is here you dara why sits at time and it's a minimal must here but we still pray with the all our dances here on the reservation are prayer. We don't do it for let's see, I don't know, for entertainment I guess, but you know, I mean, we do it in prayer everywhere, and that's stressed in the kivas. You guys are going there and it's stressed to you by your Kiva leaders or even the Meromas in the pueblos or in the villages, that's something that, you know, I mean, it's not for entertainment. Okay, we pray for all the people and then ourselves. But those are some of the things that, I mean, right now we've lost it. What's just this year, man? Oh, yeah, that's enough. Well, those new notes are not going to, okay? Okay, go to see you. That's good. You know, that's a manager. It's the it's a manager. Okay, my manager. One hand is right. Then that's the night. I'm sure Guam. Hold you, another ship, a bar Siu. I'm sure it's a Yukon, who's awake the Messiah, who is another, awake the Messiah. My grandfather was full-blooded Laguna. We used that as trying to be Laguna members. Or, and this morning I said that maybe our language, yung ashir shkatan shenya, yung inspired kaya kan the whole Kuan Yao shkatan shenya. And you're going to the can we use that? Maybe the council might say, let's use our language so we can become Lagunas again. I don't know. I said, we don't know that. We're not here to say this is how we should do it. These guys are brought up that, you know, we're just here to get some information. But, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, really. I'm hands, and that's how come we kind of stress that, you know, let's try and speak our language. I know each and every one of you can. I know that it's just, why? Why don't you guys speak it? Why don't we speak it? Are you afraid? Or are you ashamed of the language? I don't know that. That's you, individuals. You are the one that's going to answer that question. You know, there's programs out there that teach the language. This Irene Lenti Gastro teaches up in Hawaii. Myself and Charles Pancho teach it down in Mesita on Wednesdays. And I think she teaches hers on Tuesday evenings, and ours is Wednesday evenings from 5 to 7. I think hers is from 5 to 6. 6 to 8, yeah. So there's places, and you know, I mean, there's people around that still speak our language. Go to them, stay there and cry it. Man, it's nice to hear you guys speak in our language. I just praised the lady. I didn't get her name, but she spoke in our language. Tawai. Man, that was nice. Good to hear it, even though it's just from way out there. She lives way out there. She still speaks our language. We went to Barcelona a couple weeks ago. Same thing. I mean, I was surprised. I got touched. Those people actually still speak our language. I mean, fluently. There's a few of them out there. The younger kids, they're starting to speak too. You know, I mean, that kind of says, wow, you know, how come we can't all do it? And you feel youth on. Okay, man, I don't know, maybe the council might say, okay, what's your strats on Shenyang? No, I tell us what to hang it, go come in the age of wow. I mean, if you finish in the other, you share the men, Guyana, when you start there, share. So I see how they mass children. You get angry because, well, they're just changing this thing. Right now, it's our fault that we don't speak our language. Us, like as parents, even grandparents, it's kind of our fault that we never taught our grandkids or our kids ourselves. But, you know, I mean, some of us are fortunate enough that we grew up with our parents both speaking our language. So some of us can speak pretty good. Like I said, there's still people around that can talk. And then go to them. You know, somebody, if you're interested, you know, good. Go to them and try and learn. But like I say, well, I should over here to a fish. See, and I'm in Kai, now, everything. Say, see, honey, make cashing. Wood gal, say, see, gal, say, school. Everything is the white man's way now. And we're getting improved that way. Even our language. Say, see. In grade school, I mean, that was how we were brought up. We're in grade school, elementary, they used to call it day school back then. So that was way back. So, but anyway, we got punished for speaking our language in the school, you know, and that was because they didn't want to hear us speak our language. Already back then, they were trying to get us away from our own language. But, you know, these are some of the things that we need to try and bring back. But then, that, I don't know, we can't. It's a split now. I mean, I don't know, that's a good example of how, you know, our languages get pulled apart too. So, if you're a man, or gay man, or a trace of man, or tribe man, it's even nice to be struck. Drama shit, cruise, I should see, you know, who's not Mr. Nature, see, my man. Let's see, you must go to massage, and Nature, old time, then not cruise of hanging, to get home a star. It's a week time, soloing with the romance, but old time, see, it's a drama ship, cruise, such, you got such.
So one of the things that I think is really critical here, and Alvin touched on it, in one of the sessions that we had, language came out as a big element, as a way to identify. So we don't have it up here as a connecting point, but it really is. Right? So that came out. Well, really, what we're trying to do is demonstrate we have these institutions that already exist that demonstrate how we belonged and celebrated that belonging in the past. This is a picture that I found from the Zuni at their museum. A number of years back, Zuni Pueblo was involved in a lawsuit, land rights litigation, and the state of Arizona said, Zuni, why are you here? You don't have a dog in this fight. And it was around areas of the Grand Canyon. But Zuni's emergence stories and history point to the areas of the Grand Canyon. So what they did is they actually told their story, but they had artisans within their community draw certain elements of their creation story. And this is one of the items that came out of it. But I thought it was very relevant to what we're trying to do. Again, I think clans are the ultimate model of belonging, and how we demonstrate connection. And this isn't something that's written in policy or you have to have low quantum or whatever. It demonstrates how we belong. And so even in our communities and a lot of the older folks, you all recall, saw some of this with, growing up here in the village. If an older person ran into you or met you and they didn't know you, they didn't initially start by asking you what your name is. They asked you, Baba. Then they finally got to you. So it was not only who you belong to, but how you belong, including clans. So we already have systems that demonstrate how we belong. And so it becomes really critical to think about, when we're talking about lineage, what does that really mean? Right? So it becomes important that we think about these models. This is some of the feedback that came from the Who Belongs conference. We got over almost 400 surveys returned, and like I said, they were very deeply thought. We went through those surveys, excuse me, and here were some of the findings or things that people wrote. That last bullet is, I think, one of the strongest ones that were written in the surveys. We as people are like trees. We all have roots that expand deep into the earth, our mother. We have branches, leaves that will grow and come and go with the seasons and generations. We must be as strong as a tree, but keep in mind that a tree is only as strong as and healthy as its roots. I thought that was really important, because it says nothing about blood quantum, but it says everything about how we're connected to our families, and our community. It's a different way of saying lineage. I mean, that's only my interpretation. You might interpret it differently. But that's kind of how I think that was really, I think, a profound statement that somebody shared. And folks didn't put names on their surveys. I don't know who made this comment, so they're sitting in the room. Thank you for your thought, and that came on this. Think about how much more we will gain by being inclusive for people and those that are yet to come. And when you think about our elders and even our council, you think about those guidance, those pieces of guidance they share, that we're not making decisions just for today, but we're making decisions for those that are yet to come. That's really important, because it's perpetuating that existence of who we are as a government. As long as one knows that clan families exist, we belong to the land and to a place where the ancestors still are. The fractional blood does not matter. This is really interesting as well. And so, we hear, even in our whether it's ceremonies, meetings, we reference the land there's that connection. So I think it's really important that these kind of elements be acknowledged as we go through this process. Here are some more comments that were shared as a result of the surveys. The third bullet, I think, is really important. Without blood quantum, we have no limits. Again, you can interpret that to however you need. But my interpretation of that, we're our own self-limitation. And so it's really important that we think about the bigger picture. One of the participants last week reminded that we have to not think about just here in Laguna, but it's a world view. So it's really important, because we have tribal members not only here, but in Germany and wherever life is taken. And we can't forget them either. This is the first step to true sovereignty, self-defined. As I mentioned, there's a definition for Indian in almost every major federal program, but it's not a definition that we've come up with. Blood quantum is not a requirement of the federal government. But we use it. So, and to the point where it's protected in our Constitution, but it's also the tool that's going to do away with this. Kind of contradictory there. So these were some of the responses. Of those surveys that were responded or provided back, 95% responded that they wanted to move away from blood quantum. Again, this was in a scientific survey or anything kind of finger in the air, but I think it gives a pretty good indication of where community is at. 4% wanted more information, 1% did not answer yes or no. And again, the survey, there was a question on there that said, do you want to continue with blood quantum, yes or no? And so what was interesting is that those that didn't answer, in their written comments, it was very clear that they wanted to move away from blood quantum. So I think the writing is in the wall to a certain degree as to what direction folks that have been participating in these meetings want to go. And Alvin mentioned we were in Barstow a few weeks ago with some of our community members, and they want the same thing we do. It's no different. And so I think in this regard, it's really important that we incorporate this thinking into how we go forward. I mentioned if the council decides to move forward with this effort, a big piece of this is going to be those constitutional amendments. A conversation that will need to be held with the council, and then it be authorized and out to the community. And as the question that, one of the ladies asked, we asked a question on the Constitution about the language. Is it replicative or duplicative in other constitutions? This might be the opportunity to make it our Constitution, not a copycat of the IRA. And it should be informed with this kind of thinking. Not penalizing, not a penalty document, but a guiding document that is informed by you. So, to be some heavy lifting on that part, but I think that's going to be important. So this next slide, one of the things that we've been asked is, what else is out there? What other models? What else are other tribes doing? And there's a slew of different scenarios, but we pulled down those ones that we thought were probably the easiest, because the other thing is that we don't want to say the easiest. What maybe are more relevant to what we're trying to do, but also points out some things that we don't want to do. Like I said, there's a number of models out there, but we could also confuse you and ourselves pretty easily because of the variations of models that are out there. But here are a few that we've come across. The obvious one is blood quantum. This is one that the majority of the tribes use, but they have the same problem that we do. They flatline. Because people get to the point where they can't beat the blood quantum. It expedites the termination process. And if you go back to our, the federal history and the creation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of War, and the purpose was to do away with tribes, the extermination, the genocide period. We're probably doing their job better than they are. The termination policy, those kind of things. Just maybe a little different flavor. Lineal descendant model. A lot of tribes use this one as well. And this is the one, again, that we're suggesting, and I mentioned Lorraine, we're talking on the break as well. One of the things she shared with us is, the enrollment office already issues a letter of descendancy. So we've built off of that conversation, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But we think that what we've showed you are historical ways of connection, of families, of clans, those things that we once had. That is how we define lineage, what we want. Basically, you can trace your roots to a family member and the roles, and you can apply for membership. So one of the questions, and I just want to acknowledge Councilman Ryan Riley, who's joined us this morning. So thank you for being here. As a matter of fact, one of the questions that he asked in one of our council meetings is that, what about blood quantum? Do we just erase it? And that had a really good conversation in council. And the answer is no, that we would use it as a baseline. When we go forward, we would look at things like a lineage model. So that way, we don't terminate all that work that's been done, but we have a historical piece as well. So it helps us on that element. DNA, this is one that some tribes use to determine membership. And this one I think is littered with issues in DNA, and I think it's very dangerous. Because when you look at things like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and all these types of sites, DNA can tell you your genetic, ethnicity, indigenous or Hispanic or European. Well, it can tell you indigenous, but it can't tell you that you're Latino. It can't tell you that you're Cherokee or whatever. It can only tell you that particular element this one.
But also in the fine print, of a lot of these things, they tell you once you give your DNA to them, they own your DNA. It's not yours anymore.
Her comment, for those of you that may not have heard her, was the concern of when you use these services like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, they become the owners of your DNA. So that becomes a challenge. So the other thing is it creates situations like We all saw the news with Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren, you know, and what that created for her when she got her DNA tested, and she's Native American, and this whole big fiasco that erupted for her. We might have situations like that. And so those are things that we need you to be thinking about as well. I shared with the group last week, and some of you may have seen it on YouTube. There's this young lady that says she's her father's from Laguna. She's from back east or something. And she documents her trip. She's actually come and she got a job in Albuquerque, I think, and then she's come out here to Laguna looking for her father. So I see some heads nodding, so you might have seen that in the same video. You know, and so it's interesting because we have individuals that may be in that scenario. I've looked at it, and I don't know how you listen to this, I don't know if she's just doing it or if there's reality, I don't know how to determine that. But she's coming out here to find her father. So, you know, we have individuals that are in that situation. We also have situations where, you know, we have Mississippi Choctaw. And you may recall a number of years ago, they had a process of using DNA. And this is why I say it's littered and it's dangerous. Littered with issues are dangerous. But it created a situation for them where they'll go through a DNA test, come to find out, well, that's really not your dad. And it created family issues. And very divisive, which is not what we want. So those are some of the things that are out there. More close to home, Nambe and Zia Pueblo. Zia Pueblo, in an effort to grow their population, we know that we're one of the smallest of those in New Mexico. And in an effort to grow their population, they began to accept non-Zia people on their roles. They have to go through a probation period, they complete that probation period, and then they become Zia for their own determination. So if that's a process we want to use, we kind of already have that option, right? From what was in the Constitution and the Council's authority. So those kind of things come into play. One of those examples is on paper, maybe you're one half Laguna and one half Zia. Fill out the paperwork to be Zia. On paper, they'll make you 4/4 Zia. Doesn't mean you disregard your other tribe, but on paper, you're a member in that context. Is that something we want to think about? I don't know. But I'm just throwing these things out for you to think about. So we're not just here saying here's one option, but there's a number of scenarios that are out there.
I'm not sure if I understood your statement. You said Zia, you're in your last example, that Zia would make you 4/4 Zia. What do you know about their conversations about how one quantum eventually was satisfied or not, whatever, how it was, what went on?
Okay. I don't know the technicalities of how they get there, of what their internal process is, other than at the end of the story, I've been understood to, or come to understand that they can, on their own sovereign terms, I guess, determine what their blood quantum is going to be for a person. I'm sure they work with other enrollment offices. You know, look at Lorraine, she can probably help us with I'm confusing it, but I think that I would assume that they work with other enrollment offices to determine, making sure that person is a member of this other tribe or they have a certain amount of blood quantum.
So they maintain a certain level of blood quantum.
Yes. So those are different scenarios, you know, and again, I think if we wanted to drill deeper, I'm sure they would offer to help us, you know, understand their model.
Now, in relation to earlier parts of the session today, and I think I saw you mention to somebody that it's proposed or being thought about or whatever, that in the eventual definition, as people are envisioning it, that there would be a bottom level, so to speak. Now, my question is, I think it would be helpful for the committee to calculate that, what that looks like. Because it's, I mean, however it's done, I mean, that's just numbers. So you just postpone, it seems to me you just postpone extinction. That's what would happen with the bottom level.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why that first part of the presentation, those numbers, that's why Lorraine was so valuable with helping us out. Because you're exactly right. You saw, we just do this. That's all we do. We just postpone it. And so, but I think those are questions as when we report back to council to be able to provide that kind of feedback. It gives us the opportunity to say, hey, maybe it makes sense to reach out to Zia and get more deeper understanding of how they've done it or other tribes. So I think that those kind of questions are very important. Ed's capturing our minutes here, so those are things that we'll be able to share back with our group. So I want to go on to Nambe. So Nambe came down, when was this already? Maybe about 3 years ago? So they came down and they shared with us their membership process and their model. And I put a few slides out. They gave us the whole packet of policies and everything. So it's really interesting how they're structured. So in 1980, they created their membership law. They have 3 categories. One is a blood quantum. That's one way to become recognized. So you saw in 1980 it was 1/4. In 1994, in an amendment, they reduced it to 1/16. So you only have to have 1/16 blood quantum to be Nambe. A native Nambe Indian, what they're talking about there is lineage. If you can determine or explain who your parents or grandparents are, you can be a member. And the last one is members recognized by the council. So those first 2, number 1 and 2, maybe a person doesn't qualify on either of those things, but the council can say, we're still going to allow this person to be a member. So that's one scenario that or 3 scenarios that they have. And so they have a number of documents related to their domestic relations. I talked earlier about the scenario that we're going to be having to think about. Adoptions, marriages, those kind of things. For them, this is how they determine or decide lineal consent or membership. All persons who are directly descendant from A Pueblo of Nambe ancestor, B, someone named in the Pueblo of Nambe's tribal membership register. If you can trace your roots to a Nambe ancestor or to anyone on the membership rolls, then you can apply for membership. That last one, I literally just put a paste out of their documents. So at the time we were working out some final policies, but those are ways that they allow for membership. This is an interesting one. They allow non-Indians to become members. And in no way are we suggesting this. Folks have just asked, what are the models? So here it is. Here's one of the models. And this is exercised by council authority. This is a situation where they're not going to meet the blood quantum, the 1/16, and they're not going to be able to show what we're around the 8. So they're considered limited members. I would assume the analogy is a naturalized member. So those are things that Nambe does. So that's one of the models that we've looked at. Lorraine, if you remember any conversation on that presentation, anything you want to add to that?
So when you're saying non-Indians, they haven't met denominating membership, but it could be an instance like we talked about of a child that's been raised in that culture in the community? Or is that two different things?
Yeah, it could be, using Zisha Hanzi, right? He spoke Zulu very well, he's in the village so far. A lot of us were, Rocky counterparts here, we all grew up around Hanzi. You know, Maureen, a lot of you went back to Bologna from here, and gas cream. But, you know, if the Pueblo so decided, they could allow it. So,
I was just wondering about, thank you. I was just wondering about the early non-Indians that played such a central role, I guess you'd have to say, in within the government in the late 1800s and so forth. How many of those Marmons, Crabs, whatever, that group that came in, how many of those became members, or were they ever passed?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if we looked at that historically, or look at Lorraine. Because when you look at that 1908 Constitution, the very last clause says, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing it, all previous decisions and laws, traditional laws of the Pueblo are now null and void. So I think how they determine membership after that, they probably have a big claim. They may have been members, I don't know. But that's interesting. We should take note and try to research that. Interesting. That was a very disruptive time for the Pueblo. So that being said, for us as a group, we have the opportunity to think about, so what would make the best sense for us as a public? We saw all those other models. We know already what blood quantum is leading to. Kind of just a postponed termination, DNA, all these others, or combinations of those models. For us, we believe those other models continue to divide and conquer, and that makes a difficult model for us. It's kind of a melting pot approach that perpetuates the extermination and assimilation policy. And I think when we think about assimilation, we can probably slice that in a number of different ways. When we think about what these Alvin talked about earlier, different language. So those are some things that we felt were not constructive and advantageous to how we perpetuate our Pueblo's existence. Belonging. We thought that this would be the best model, i.e. lineage. The strengths of our teachings, those things that we talked about earlier, not only how you belong, but who do you belong to? Your grandparents, your clan, your village, and all those kinds of things. We get the opportunity to decide how that happens. The cultural institutions that already exist, the family and community identity. Those may not be technical, policy, law type worded reasons, but there are reasons. And so this is, for us as a commission, we spend a lot of time talking about these items and why we landed where we landed on this suggestion. We don't think DNA is the right way. We don't think blood quantum is the right way. So we landed here. I mean, there's a reason for DNA for other situations, and I think very specific and unique situations that the government can utilize. But for the larger picture, we think this is the best approach. And this will require new language. And like I was saying, the Constitution we have right now, our Pueblo Constitution is really a boilerplate from the 1934 IRA. So how do we make it ours? In our own terms, in our own merits. So just kind of a juxtaposition here of these different scenarios. Blood quantum that Nambe uses was kind of comparing it to theirs. Our current goals, our current base blood quantum that we have on record, that would serve as a baseline. So we wouldn't just be erasing it. The lineage model will serve as a primary method, and we would have to further define what that comes out. Goes to Evelyn's question: how do you word this? How do you structure this? And that's why I mentioned earlier at the beginning, it was important that we have, I'm glad Councilman Riley's here, because it's important that we have council members hearing your comments, because it's going to help how that is done. Because we could capture it in writing, but there's a chance we could still misinterpret. Right? So we'll try very hard not to do that. And then the last one, members recognize that the tribal council, Nambe has that authority, so do we. And I would be willing to guess that in their constitution, the language is probably pretty much the same. So these are the reasons why we think that the lineage model is the best model for us going forward. And I also want to be very clear that as a commission, we're not here to try to sell you on what we're thinking or why we think this is a model to try to market you. We're just trying to inform you as to why we think this is the best approach for us. As I said, if you think there's a better way, by all means, please help us. Please give us that information. It's not going to hurt our feelings, because our goal is to try to capture your feedback as best as possible. But based on the work we've done, this is what we've done. So, as we begin to wind down this piece of the presentation and get closer to the discussion period, here are some things that we want you to think about. In particular to that first bullet. A lot of tribes, when it goes back to the duplication in constitutions, a lot of tribes, when they go through this work, not only in this kind of work, but other work, we tend to look at what everybody else is doing and copy them, whether or not it fits us. So I would ask you to think about the models that we shared with you. You might be aware of others, but at the end of the day, what should be our model? Family perpetuation. We have situations where tribal member A is a tribal member, but their sibling is not, or siblings naturalized. Wow. So those are scenarios that we have. Cultural, social, economic policies. And after this slide, I'm going to ask Ed to share with you a little bit on we've looked at some of the federal relationships, benefits, right? We talked about, does this impact benefit the federal agencies, IHS, BIA, IGWA, all those kind of things. And Professor Hershey and the group did this research for us, so it was very helpful, very interesting to see what they shared back with us. Constitutional changes, what might be. Again, to begin to plant the seed with you all, how do we make this our constitution? In our own terms, in our own ways. those other things of adoption, children, spouses, marriage, divorce, you know, and it goes back to Ms. Daya's question of non-natives becoming members. What if we have a non-native married to a tribal member? How do we manage those situations? How do you want to manage those situations? As the questions will come up. So it's important to start thinking about those now, because you may have a relative or a family member in that situation. Marriage, divorce. Again, we run into those situations where we have a tribal member married to a non-tribal member that becomes a member. The divorce happens. What do you do with the land assignment? The home. So there's a number of scenarios. Again, I'm not asking you to answer those questions right now, but I want you to be thinking about those kind of things, because we're going to see this domino effect, right? Touching on the Aromas ordinance, touching on the enrollment policy, touching on ordinances. So it's not just the Constitution. There's going to be a lot of other impacts that this will have. Naturalization. This could be a pretty easy one based on the ordinance that already exists that was passed in 1959. But if we go down the path of lineage, then we really don't have any regular member or naturalized member. We just have members. And that's, I think, a goal for us. And we just have members. Right of return, I explained that scenario earlier. Cultural connection. Those institutions that we shared with you. Strength in numbers. And just touching on the benefits real lightly. But when you look at it from maybe a grant funding side of the lens, a lot of these federal grants are based on population. That's why you see Navajo and Cherokee get a lot of money, because they have huge tribal membership. But also to be cautious that we don't want to grow just to get federal money. So that becomes real important. Other conversations that we've had in the council body, and again, this is a constitutional issue. When you look at PCD, in the Constitution, once the council accepts the annual audit, then they can declare a per capita. The next clause in the Constitution then says that per capita doesn't have to be issued in cash, it can be in kind. So the council doesn't have to issue a check. Right? If the council so chose, they could give everybody notebooks and they're allowed to walk. In kind. One of the things that we did point out in the 1984 constitutional amendment, that's when they made the per capita, I guess, an annual thing. Prior to that, it was not an annual thing. One of the things that Lorraine shared with us is the years when the first per capita happened. It happened in 1959, and then the next one didn't happen until 1969, 10 years later. And after that, it was just sporadic. So it wasn't a requirement. But like I said, in 1984, that changed. I don't know, even the Constitution says you have to do it. All it says is that you can declare it. It doesn't say you have to. So those are things that I think are really important to think about. So also strengths and numbers, the conversations that we've had, when you look at this PCD, we give a, I don't know, $200 check, I guess maybe an average, that we give out on an annual basis. But instead of giving a per capita, giving a check, why don't we give our tribal members health care, health insurance? That would be much more impactful. Right? And so, but we also know that in health care, in these health plans, the more members you have, the lower the cost. So that's one way to look at it. So those are things that come into play. But again, it's not our commission's responsibility to crack that egg and solve that problem. But these are things that we want to plant in you to think about as we go forward. How do we look at it differently in the future and for those that are yet to come? Healthcare, again, is really critical. Pointed out last week, with younger people, the insurance is probably higher because they're more of a considered risky. But when you're just starting out your family, for those kind of things, that money can be helpful. The other end of the spectrum, you have individuals that have worked a long, great career, but maybe they have some health challenges. But they're on a fixed income. Now they haven't used that fixed income to cover their health. That should be. Right? So those are scenarios that if we can address this through this process, it allows us to put resources back into family homes, the checkbook, or whatever the case would be. But those are things that I think you have the opportunity to think about going into the future. So just to offer that thinking. So let me ask Ed, before we go to the next slide, to just briefly share with you some of the things that we found as it relates to the federal relationships.
Find it interesting, okay, the different things that we may be facing. So I guess some of the things is that, again, with Dr. Hershey's report that he gave back to us on some of the statutory benefits that we're eligible for under, like tribal membership or lineage. Again, it says that the question was, in consideration of federal statutory benefits, will tribal members will tribal members eligible for federal benefits be compromised? Again, like he says, the short answer is to that one is that no. The reason why is that the change from blood quantum to lineal descent will have minimal impact on the membership's access to statutory benefits, because of the underlying purpose of the benefits are to promote tribal self-determination and the welfare of the tribe and its members. So he's identified 10 different statutory benefits, from health services, food benefits, and let me see, job placement, Indian Child Welfare Act, and several others. But I'm going to just kind of reference a couple of them here that are kind of really important to us, and especially here in Laguna. And that's one is health services. Again, according to Dr. Hershey, again, it provides the health benefits to American Indians who can demonstrate that they are members of a federally recognized tribe. Under Section 136A, 116, it leaves it up to tribes to determine tribal membership requirements. And again, for establishing, again, under B, it says it's for establishing eligibility or obtaining a beneficiary card, applicants must demonstrate that they are members of a federalized Indian recognized tribe. Again, documentations that the applicant must meet the requirements of tribal membership as prescribed by the charters or incorporation of other legal documents. Again, it says that traditional process of the tribe has been officially designated a tribal member by an authorized tribal official or body. It says nothing about blood. It says nothing about blood. Certification of tribal enrollment or membership by the Secretary of the Interior, activated with DIA. Again, we're able to continue to access healthcare services regardless, again, like I said, of blood. Under the food benefits, again, that kind of goes back to the SNAP program, which is really actually state, comes through the state as well. But again, it is a federally recognized program, but again, administered through the state. And again, with that being said, state agency administering the program let me go back again. State agencies administering the program in a near area shall, for the purpose of determining program eligibility, accept documentation from a household member's tribe of origin as proof of tribal membership. Proof of origin. It says nothing about blood again. And again, as you know that, it's like food stamps and stuff is basically around, income based. Other things is for job placement and training programs. The JPT, changing the tribal membership qualifications from blood quantum to lineal descent will not affect tribal members accessing that particular program. And under the Indian Welfare Act, a statutory benefit flowing from ICWA apply to children who are members of a federally recognized tribe or other potential members. So it's up to the tribe to determine who belongs. So there are many others in here, especially one is that the adult education program also as well. It also states that tribal members will be able to receive benefits under the tribal education program. If tribes were to switch from enrollment requirements from blood quantum to lineal descent, again, it's the purpose of the AEP is to improve educational opportunities for Indians who lack the level of literacy skills necessary for effective citizenship and productive employment. So if that nowhere in there does it state that you're not able that you're going to still be eligible for these benefits, these statutory benefits, regardless of each switch from blood quantum to lineal descent or other. I think the only impact I think that was the only statutory benefit was the appropriation for educational loans or grants. With this one, it says an Indian student seeking to receive loans or grants for attending accredited college or vocational schools outside the reservation must have at least 1/4 Indian blood to be eligible. And that's pretty much the only thing under these federal statutory, what do you call it, programs that's the only one that's going to really that impacts blood quantum, is that particular one, that last one that I just read. So those are things, like I said, if we decide to change, if you all decide to change and move forward, we're still going to be able to access some of those programs that have been kind of outlined here, and there's many more in here.
Thank you.
I just want to, as regards the last reference to 1/4, because the feds require 1/4 or whatever, there's nothing, that's not in cement. I mean, it's been around forever. And that initially, that's the number that the feds took on to determine how many Indians they're going to give rations to or whatever. It was all, that's how the 1/4 concept began. But now that more and more tribes are moving toward lineage, descendancy, and so forth, there will come a time when the tribes will come together, and NCAI and those others are already talking about this, when the tribes will come together and get that 1/4 fed removed, and that the feds would have to rely on the tribal determination of eligibility for X. That will come.
Thank you, Evelyn, for that. And what Evelyn's comments is it sparked a reminder of a conversation we had in the council as well, and Councilman Riley can probably touch on it because he was actually at some of those meetings. And it's specific to ICWA and to the Indian Child Welfare Act. There's a case in Texas that the Texas Supreme Court has ruled against ICWA, saying that ICWA was unconstitutional because it's based on race. So that creates a major issue for us, because if we continue with this blood quantum model, we're helping that argument of race, right? And when you look at what Trump and that administration is trying to do and move everything to this conversation and model of race, we're helping that argument. And we need to get away from that. So I think it's really important that, to her point, the lineage model becomes the framework for how we go forward. And when you look at any other nation, whether it's the United States, China, or whatever, whether you're getting your visa or you're getting citizenship, they don't ask you if you're 1/4 Pakistani or 1/4 whatever. We do that to each other. And we consider ourselves a nation. So those are things that I think we need to think about. They're very serious issues in how we perpetuate going forward. The things that Ed pointed out on those federal relationships, I think the one thing in everything that he read that is so very critical is that 99% of those that he read are based on membership, not blood quantum, membership. And the tribes have the authority to determine what that means. And it doesn't have to be blood quantum. And so that's a really critical piece for us to go forward, because it then strengthens what the argument that Evelyn's making, that as we become stronger in that model, then it makes it harder for the argument of race. And so it's an interesting conversation of where we're at. So another question?
Another question I'd like to comment on. In the first session, there was quite a bit of back and forth about membership, citizenship, those concepts. And I was thinking, as you were talking, it reminded me, and as regards people's concern with benefits, I think, as I recall the conversation in November, the theme that came through with regard to that discussion was kind of like John F. Kennedy's statement: think not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. And I think that the whole concept of citizenship opens the way for people to understand and see and participate in that more broadly than members, where, because the member concept is caught up in the colonial experience, and where the federal government, etc., determines the criteria, and we lived under that for over 100 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, we're not a country club, we're a baseball team.
Start over. Gladzi Hinaman Sutsietsa. So I do speak a little bit, very little Laguna. And I do have the link also to start learning more. So I've made some notes here by way of further introduction. I am the Director of Indian Education for the state of Arizona. So I work in Phoenix. And it was important for me to come here not only as a tribal member, but as somebody who works for all the tribes in Arizona. We have 22 tribes in Arizona, much like Arizona. I mean, New Mexico has 22 pueblos and tribes. It's important because one of the things that I do in my job is administer the Johnson O'Malley grant. Now, Johnson O'Malley typically goes from the federal government to a tribe, and then they subcontract to school districts in their state. But in Arizona, it's a little bit different. We do have that, but we also have 26 eligible entities that get their funding through us at the department. And so I administer that program. And it's very important to think about funding and how it affects education, and whether you're a member or not, and how you became a member. To your point, and to the point that the gentleman made about the impacts of lineal descent. I don't know if you're aware, but the Johnson O'Malley Act, the student counts were frozen in 1995, which meant that at least one generation of Native students who would otherwise be eligible weren't allowed to get services from Johnson O'Malley because they weren't counted. And therefore the funding was also frozen. But the Johnson O'Malley, it's a really long name, Supplemental Educational Modernization Act, actually passed in December. It's one of the good things, maybe the only good thing that this administration has done. I mean in DC. It was passed, and that means that they are not only going to look at it. In the past, the requirement was 1/4 Indian blood from a federally recognized tribe, but now it's going to be or descent, lineal descent, so that they can show that they have them. And one of my comments is that we kind of have to be a little bit leery about people wanting to say, like the DNA you mentioned. People, they get their DNA results back. This is all Native American, and so they say, "Are my children eligible for Indian services out of Johnson O'Malley or Title VI?" And I've said no, because like you said, it doesn't say whether you're a member of a federally recognized tribe. It doesn't say what tribe you belong to. It could be someone from Central America, was your ancestor, not necessarily somebody here who went through the history or whose family went through that history of oppression and everything else, that we've had to suffer over the centuries. And the purpose of those funds are to help those kids, who don't have services otherwise, or who can't meet the educational, or they can't pass that grade level, or they need extra help. So we have to kind of be leery, I think, of that a little bit. And then the naturalized, what's the definition of being naturalized? Should there be criteria for that? Because I grew up off the reservation. I was 3 years old when we left and went into Albuquerque. And then my dad got a job in Tucson, so we moved to Tucson when I was 5. So I grew up in Arizona and spent most of my time there. Yet when I got my degree, I came to the tribe and I got a scholarship. And that's how I got my degree. I don't speak the language, like I just said, fluently. It's not my fault. My mother would be said, shame on me. So, like you said, my mother didn't teach me because she went to St. Catherine's boarding school where they literally and figuratively pounded into her, when you have children, do not teach them Laguna. Teach them English only so that they will be successful. And unfortunately, they bought into that. That generation did. Fortunately, she retained her language, so I heard a lot of it and a lot of phrases, and so I can understand some of it. But there are people, like you were talking about before, who grew up here. They're white or other races who know the language, who participate, who practice the culture, who participate, and first of all, I'm glad to know that I will remain on the rolls. And that I didn't have to know my language to be on the rolls or be a member of the tribe, because my mom did her best, being off the reservation, to teach all of us about our Laguna culture. And I identify as Laguna more than I do white, but I don't discount my white father either, because I love him. My point is, sorry to bump on, so I get emotional when I talk about it. But my point is that I think somebody who, like I described before, who's grown up here, who knows the tradition, knows the language, who even maybe identifies with the Pueblo and our people, I would say yes, let them in. Because they, in some respects, you could say they're more Indian than I am, even though I'm half, half blood. But again, you have to be careful. Is it just people coming in, who, I'm going to live on the reservation for a while, or someone who's looking for their dad, and maybe they find them and they stay, but they know nothing about the culture, they don't know the language, they don't know the religion, or any of that. They just want, maybe want to come in and get benefits, for their kids, and that kind of relates to benefits, or the need, the availability of benefits to those people who really are members. Let's see. One other point I wanted to make was census. The census is coming around, Census 2020, and that really also impacts funding, especially educational funding or any funding that comes into any community. And Native Americans are typically undercounted, way undercounted, which means you do not get the money, and the money, through the census that comes to each state, and then it trickles down to the districts, to the schools, and to the students. That money, you guys need to be counted. And I worked on the complete count committee for 2010 census. So I've learned, and recently we had a presentation by the 2020 census people, that they're going to go only by, when you do your census, they go ahead of household. And if you are in a mixed marriage, one of you is Laguna, one of you is not, you should put in the member who is Laguna as head of household, because then that will be counted. If you have a non-native person counted as head of household, yet that person's children are at least half Laguna, they're not going to be counted either. They're going to be counted as a white household or African American or whatever it is. So don't run when the census taker comes. Don't hide from them. You can fill out your form online, so you don't have to deal with any people if you don't want to. but it's really important, again, because it impacts what comes through your state. And then lastly, I'd say, have we ever thought about doing a Laguna dating site? To produce more Lagunas. You older men get with the younger girls. No. I'll stop there.
They should have already done it.
We'll look to build that out. Well, you know, one of the things that she mentions that, again, it's not for us to resolve today, but it's probably a conversation that happens around the dinner table in the community sessions, and ultimately what will inform, again, how we move forward with this. And you know, she said, how do we define a Laguna, or how do we identify a Laguna? I think that's a really important one, because I shared with the group last, or I guess the last few sessions, when back in 2012, I believe it was, we took a group of students with us to DC on a delegation. And it was interesting because as we were preparing for that, we were going to NCAIs, as a matter of fact. And so we took a group of middle schoolers with us. And as we were preparing their presentation, they were saying, what are you going to present on, and let them build their presentation. They wanted to talk about our history and our culture, and they're very proud of being able to do it. Language and all that kind of stuff. So they were building the presentation around that. One young lady who was typically pretty contributory to the conversation, she was quiet this whole conversation. And so I didn't catch on to that right away, and finally I asked her, I asked her, why are you so quiet? Are you okay? She goes, Governor, I've grown up here my whole life. Our family goes to church, gone to school here. We don't practice the traditional ceremonies or beliefs. We don't speak the language in our home. But I'm still a Buddha. And we can't forget about our children and our families like that too. Because we believe one way doesn't mean everybody has to believe the way I do. So it is really critical that as we go through this conversation, how do we define, what does Laguna mean? Is Laguna defined here? Or is Laguna defined here? How do you translate this to this? So, again, that's a conversation or an answer that we can come up with today. But as we go forward, I would encourage you to think about it. Have those conversations around your dinner table. Have those conversations with friends, other community members, and think about that for the future. So that being said, I would, ask this question. We already have the answer. We have the systems, the infrastructure, the land, the plans, those kind of things already in place. The celebrations that we have, whether it's our most sacred ceremonies, like Feast Day, dances, the God alive, Christmas, whatever those celebrations and prayer, times of prayer are, birthday parties, when we all get together. And we already have our system of belonging and how we define image. And how do we interpret this into something that eventually sits here? Again, I keep going back to, let's define ourselves. Let's not let somebody else define us. So, that being said, this is the question that we would pose to you. Is this the best model for the youth? And again, this is, we will come to this conclusion based on the research and the information, the conversations we've had with many folks in the Pueblo and away from home. But it's not set in stone. We have to be able to provide some recommendations back to the council on what a model could look like, because if that informs, then what does that mean to those constitutional changes to everything else that we talked about earlier? If there's another model you think is more appropriate or better, or a combination of, by all means, please share it with us. I forgot to mention that with your notepads, if you're willing to share your notes with us, because sometimes folks they'll just write down their thoughts and ideas. If you could share those with us afterwards, that would be awesome. So we have another way to capture your comments. But that's the question that we would leave you with, because I think for us it's going to be important to have this question responded to, because that will help us get down that path back in November as to whether or not we feel like we're in the council. So that being said, our lunch is ready. So I think what we'll do is let's take a quick break for lunch, get your food, come back in, bring your food in here, and let's eat, and we'll have a question and comment conversation, and then we'll get into the exercise that we're going to do to wrap up today. That way after lunch, probably going to sit there and goes off. So let's do that. But before we break, and ask Councilman Riley if you had any comments or thoughts that you might want to share on the work and what we're trying to get to as a council body. And so, with that.
Good morning, everybody. For those that do not know me, my name is Ryan Riley. I'm the village representative for the village of Siama. And just kind of coincidentally, we had a village meeting this last Thursday, and we had this as part of one of our larger discussion items as far as how we were going to move forward, the who belongs presentation, recollection of the November presentation as well. And just to give you a little bit of background, one thing that I enjoyed about the presentation at council was really the historical chronology of where we're at right now. And as you can see through the slides, the enrollment process, the membership criteria is a federal process of belonging. And when you look back even before the 1900s and earlier about how our descendants, how our ancestors came to be today, it was a system of community belonging, community interaction, and we don't have to go very far to see, given our leaders in the 1900s, some of them were not Laguna, some were Hmong. However, they had a level of participation that the people in the community, Laguna members, felt that they were providing enough leadership to lead the Pueblo of Laguna, and that's an important piece of our history. You also look at the Indian Reorganization Act, which really started the system of rollback, of trying to determine the land status. Previous to that, a lot of folks were losing, a lot of Indian tribes were losing their lands, and the IRA was supposed to be the solution. So now, from a historical context, we look at, since 1934, we've had termination era, like you saw, we've had the self-determination era, and now today. So we look at this administration. And as Councilman Larkey mentioned, we see today that we're getting challenged on our tribal identity as a government, as a people. Not only with the ICWA, but also with the American, or the Affordable Care Act related to Native American coverage, where the Department of Justice has decided not to appeal some of these issues, trying to make it look like we're race-based rather than a tribal nation. We're seeing that through quite a few other items, like NAHASDA, the Native American housing. So your tribal council is presented with these challenges, and they're continuing to offer up through our membership, through our constitutions, that we are not a race only. We have treaties, we have a constitution, we have executive orders that tell us who we are. Can't forget the history moving forward. So, just to give you a personal perspective, and I wrote this down, and I didn't want to forget exactly how I was thinking as you were presenting your ideas. So I'm concerned about a biological relationship as part of the enrollment process, not necessarily as a primary criteria, but at least an accounting of that as we move forward. And why I say that is simply because we are getting challenged of who we are from a government, and I would hate to see the day that we get challenged on, in this current administration, the biological part of it. As many of you know, we've seen this president tell us that, well, you don't look like an Indian. So what does that actually mean to us? So in that respect, I would hope that we don't, when we go forward with this, and as a tribal member, my personal perspective would be lineage. I think lineage is, otherwise you're going to continue to decrease the blood quantum down to whatever level. And I say that because we do have an enrollment of 8,800 tribal members already established. And we could use that as a sound foundation to move lineage forward. A lot of different ideas, and I like your thoughts and your perspectives that you offered today. I think that's something that the council will definitely contemplate and be able to present a collection of ideas back to the membership. And one last thing I want to offer to you is I know that these presentations that we had in November, and then we've had one in Barstow, and one last week and one today, that the information is coming pretty quickly. And as we move forward and leading up to a potential constitutional amendment, that we need to find a way to get that information back to you quicker, or quickly, I should say. The village meeting process works to an extent, but we also have a lot of our tribal members that live not within commuting distance to Laguna. So we are, the council, trying to formulate different ideas to get that information back to you. I've been an advocate, and Richard heard me say this before, advocate for some sort of informational portal that we can provide the information that you can access, and then be able to get the updated information, maybe even receive comments back from you. Because to me, looking at this morning, I was at work this morning, because I had to make up for a couple of hours because we had a council meeting yesterday on Friday. So I was watching you all on YouTube this morning for about an hour. And so you guys were all getting your information out. And I saw there was quite a few other viewers on there as well. So with that, I want to thank the team, our recognition committee, for all the work that you're doing, and the council fully supports the work that they're doing, and this commission has just been set up as a formal commission. So thank you very much, and thank you all for spending your Saturday morning with us. And please, your thoughts, your opinions, don't end here. If there's any information that you have, please send them forward, and they'll get to the council and the folks that need to care of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. You points out and reminds of one thing that I think is very important that we're working towards, and that's that element of being able to not only create this clearinghouse where this information can be housed at, but you can continue to participate and either not only provide information, but continue to access it. I think it's going to be really important for that, because I think a lot of times we get lost in these meetings and you don't hear anything until 2 months later down the road or whatnot, and you forgot what was presented, but at least this gives you the opportunity. So YouTube, they end up being a platform that we use to try to keep everything current. So one of the things that maybe we'll ask, I don't know if the council will allow us to do it, but I think it's an extension of what they encouraged us to do. Why we're doing the YouTube, it really came from council. They said, and with Councilman Riley's, then Staff Officer Riley last year, strongly encouraging that we use the technology because we have to think about our tribal members that are only here but everywhere else. So it was really kind of the spearhead behind this piece, and the staff officers and then eventually the council all supported that, and that's why we're YouTubing it, so that we have the opportunity to include others. And so I think this might be the platform that will allow us to figure out a scenario as to how do we get this information available for you to access on a regular basis. So that being said, thank you, Councilman. Well, let's go ahead and take a break here to get your food. It's in the next room, so you can just go around here. I don't know if they can open up those doors, but why don't you go ahead and bring your food back in? Take an environmental break if you need to, and then we'll get back here and start the conversation, questions and answers while we're eating.
Enjoy this.
I'm with you. Thank you.